Hello, good evening, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. And I also hope that you all are taking time to go through the slides and the notes that I have been sending, and also the videos, the lecture videos that I have sent. So I have three videos I've already sent of two chapters. So this is the fourth video that I'm going to send you, and this is of chapter 7. Okay, so I also hope that you all are preparing for the presentations which we'll be taking on recordings. Okay, so it'll be good if you all can record and send your portions as lectures, and also maybe if you can use PPTs, it'll be nice. Okay, so anyhow, videos will be good if you can just make short videos of the portions that you're supposed to teach, and you all can post it to me, send it to me, and we will all watch it together. Okay, so let's move into our today's class, and let me share the screen. Okay, yeah. So today we are going to study chapter 6, which is about the triumph of faith in tests. Okay, so in the time of tests, in the time of temptations, or in the time of tests when God tests us, our faith. Okay, so this is about Abraham, how he triumphed over the tests in faith. Okay, so we will be dealing about from the life of Abraham. Okay, so basically we will be talking about Abraham from the time he started. He has already we've spoken about his journey and him reaching Canaan, and then going to Egypt, and then coming back to Canaan. Okay, so from that time onwards we are going to look into his life and see how God further tests him, and how he further faces different kind of temptations and tests, and how God, I mean, how he, with the help of God, basically, on by faith on God, is able to overcome those tests and temptations. Okay, so let's see what we are going to see into this class in the introduction part. Okay, so we see that Abraham has already gone through a lot of hardships and also seen famine, and we also see him fighting his temptations, especially now that he has acquired a lot of property and everything. We'll see further how he deals with the situations which is related to the property, and all the cash and the things that he acquires throughout his journey. So Lot, we know that Lot was his nephew, and he had traveled along with him from Ur up till now, and then he is orphaned, basically as an orphan nephew. He is dependent on the kindness of his uncle. Okay, he is dependent on the kindness of his uncle. We all know that he was often in Haran, and now he is coming along, or accompanying Abraham wherever he goes. Okay, so Abraham does not leave his responsibility; he takes him along wherever he goes. Sometime back, we see that he is dependent on Abraham for everything. But gradually, we see him that he becomes a competitor, and also a threat to unity and peace in his household. So this become a very difficult situation for Abraham to handle. Then we see that once Abraham was very fearful of for his own life. If you remember, we spoke about it in the time when he went to Egypt, and Pharaoh took Sarah to be his wife. Abraham was very scared and fearful, and he felt his life to be threatened. And then he lied at that time that Sarah is his sister, though it is half lie, but nonetheless, he that motive was wrong. That he wanted to protect his life, and he put Sarah into danger because of that. So he was so fearful that he was even ready to, put his wife into trouble. So that was a kind of fear that had gripped him at that time. But now we see that he risks his own life to save his nephew and some other people from danger. So we see that the faith that he carried had made him a different person, developed him as a different individual. So the exercise of faith in such difficult situations help our faith to grow strong. Okay, that's how we see in the life of Abraham that gradually, as he passed the tests, as he passed the temptations, as he overcame those tests and difficult situations, he in faith, actually, he grew up and he became a stronger person and became a different person altogether. Then we see that God's ever present help in times of troubles and trials and tests strengthened his faith. So when he was in the pit, or when he was in trouble, sometimes when he was in difficult situations, God never left him, but he was there with him in the times of trials and tests, and he strengthened his faith by being with him and confirming him, affirming him, and talking to him. Then we see that his word, God's word, his promises, and his presence gave him the base of faith. So we can understand how Abraham's faith increased, or how Abraham started becoming strong in his faith. It was through the word of God and the promises that God gave him, and actually the presence that always followed Abraham or went along with Abraham. He also, we see him, he had to exercise this faith. Basically, faith just cannot be, it cannot be passive, it has to be active. Okay, so he exercised his faith to confront the challenges of life. So it is very important that we do not only passively, we not only passively follow or take part in the challenges, but we take actively part in the challenges and use our faith to overcome those challenges and face and confront those challenges. Then we see that failures taught him more about God's loving care and patience. Okay, so we see when he failed in particular circumstances, when he failed in those challenges, we see that it taught him more to be stronger. It taught him more to overcome those things. So he was not depressed by the failures that he faced, but these failures taught him to be it taught him to grow actually, and taught him more about God's love and care and patience. So trials should be seen. Basically, we learn from Abraham's life that trials should be seen as stepping stones into greater spiritual understanding and trust in God. So when we face trials and when we go through tests, those are not stumbling blocks. We should not take them as stumbling blocks, and we should not take them as hindrances, but actually we should take them as stepping stones for greater spiritual understanding and for trusting in God. So in those circumstances, when we are going through trials and tests, in those times we need to trust in God more. We need to have more faith in God and act accordingly. Okay, so Genesis 13 to 15 basically teaches us how to trust God in our problems. Okay, so that's what we are going to learn from the life of Abraham right now. So just to see the lesson outline, we can see that we will basically see four major points in this lesson. We'll talk about the problems in the time of prosperity. So Abraham faced a lot of problems when he became prosperous. Okay, then we also see that how he risked his life to save, or basically risked everything, his men and his everything. He risked everything to save others. Okay, then we also see as a reward, we see that he is blessed after the victory, because after he gained victory in those battles, after he gained victory in those things, we also see that he was blessed by God. And then we see a prophecy, a covenant and prophecy. And we see that how God cut a covenant with Abraham, and we also see what prophecy God gave him at that time about the future. Okay, so let's begin and we'll look into the first point, that is problems in prosperity. Okay, which is in chapter 13. So basically, we'll be looking at chapter 13 and 14. Okay, so this is we'll see about the problems in prosperity. Okay, so now he is in Canaan. We know that he is in Canaan right now, and he has become a very prosperous person. So Abraham returned to Canaan from Egypt, where he renewed his dedication, where he renewed his calling, where he renewed his submission before God, and he started calling on the name of the Lord once again. Though he has not lost his faith in God, but we see that he comes back and he again raises the altar, and then we also see that he starts rededicated his life to God and to his service. And then we see that God prospered him, and he acquired a lot of wealth and prestige. So it's not only wealth from the business that he gained, but he also gained a lot of prestige and respect among the people that he was living with. Okay, it's not easy to gain respect, but we see that because God was with him and he prospered so much and he acquired a great amount of wealth, we also see that he became a very prestigious person and a person of great honor and a person of great respect. And people around him, though they were not believers and though they did not had faith in the true God, but still we see that he was a person of fame and he became a person of honor. Okay, so we see this about him. He was an excellent businessman. He was an excellent businessman, and it is believed that he was a merchant who was engaged in caravan trade. We all know what is caravan trade. So caravans are basically where there were a lot of the people traveled in a lot of camels, on camels, and they loaded those camels with a lot of precious things and whatever they want to sell and trade. So they used to load those camels with all those riches and all those things, and they used to travel on different routes, and they used to uh, do barter system, or they used to trade those things and get wealth from that. Okay, so these were caravan traders. So probably it is said about Abraham that he was a caravan trader and a very successful one also. He and his people lived in tents. Okay, though he was a very rich businessman, he and his people lived in tents, and they traveled from place to place with their flocks. Okay, with their herds and with their flocks, they traveled all through. So it's for sure that they were not poor people. They were not middle class. Also, they were quite rich and wealthy people. So Abraham and his family and his whole household, it was very rich and very powerful, and basically very well to do. Okay. So God prospered him in Egypt also, where he put himself into trouble, where we saw that he created mess for himself. We see that over there also, God, blessed him. He added more and more servants to him, and he added more livestock to him, and eventually he had a force of around 318 men servants. He had a force of around 318 men servants, and many of them actually were born while serving Abraham. So the parents got children, and they also were serving Abraham. So we see that many of them were born in his service, and they were faithful to Abraham, and they were also trained to fight. Okay, so though there were not many fights in those times, but they were trained to fight also. So he had a good number of men servants. They had a good number of female servants who used to take care of the household things. He had a lot of livestock. He was a wealthy rich man, filthy rich man. Okay, so we also see that even the Canaanite chieftains, the high officials of the Canaanites, they recognized Abraham as a prince. Okay, because he was so much wealthy that they recognized him as a prince, though he was not in reality a prince, but they recognized him as a prince because of the wealth that he had acquired and the number of people that was serving him. So they made alliances with him. Okay, they made alliances and treaties with him for their own benefits. They wanted his protection. They wanted his, good. They wanted to be in good terms with him. So for their own benefits in business or in every way. Okay, so they wanted to keep a good relationship, um, uh, good relationship with Abraham. So God blessed him because he left his uncle. Sorry, he left his riches in Ur and followed God. Okay, so we see that because Abraham was, faithful to God, because Abraham was obedient to God, because God told him to move out of Ur, and he did not question God. He just moved out of Ur, believing and following that voice of God. So God blessed him for that much, that obedience that he showed towards God. So it's not only that we listen to the word of God, but it is also important that we follow the way or obey whatever God tells us, so that we may be blessed. So obedience actually, the blessings follow obedience. So when we are obedient to God, blessings definitely follow. So we see in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, it says, seek first his kingdom and all his righteousness, and all these things will be given unto you or added to you. Okay, that's what Matthew 6:33 says. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to seek his kingdom. Seek his kingdom, and we have to seek his righteousness. We have to, seek God and try to be righteous like him, and then we see that all these things are going to follow us. All these riches are going to be added unto us. So in Old Testament, we observe, in most of the places we will observe that the materialistic blessings and prosperity was sign of God's reward of obedience. Okay, so whenever you see rich people, whenever you see people who are materially blessed, or we see the people who are prosper, it actually signified, or it symbolized that God is pleased with them, and he is rewarding them for the obedience. So the good people or the righteous people were expected to be materially blessed. And if you're poor or you're struggling, or if you do not have much, so it means that God is judging or God is not happy with you. So that was a concept, we can say, in the Old Testament, where the materialistic blessings were associated with with the obedience of pleasing God, or God's being happy with the person. So if God is happy with you, you will be materialistically or materially blessed or prosperous. But if you are not, God is not happy with you, then you something is wrong, and God is not blessing you materially. Okay. The next thing that we see over here is a problem over property. So we all just saw that Abraham had acquired a lot of wealth. Abraham had acquired a lot of flocks. Abraham had acquired a lot of herds, and we also see that though they were living in tents, they were very prosperous, and he had a lot of number of people, around 318 men. Men servants he had, and we also know that adding to the men servants there would also be female servants. So he actually had a small kingdom, a small nation of his own, where his people were there, and his everything was about him. Okay, so he was very rich and well-to-do person at that time, and it creates a lot of problem, because now we see that even Lot is with him. Okay, so Lot was also with him, and staying with him, Lot also acquired much of the flocks, and he used to also travel with Abraham. And okay, so we were seeing that Lot also used to Lot also used to travel along with Abraham, and he also gained a lot of wealth and lot of riches in those times. He also became very prosperous at that time, which created a lot of dispute between their men. Actually, probably it was not between Lot and Abraham, but it definitely created a lot of problems between Lot's servants and Abraham's servants. Okay, so we see that as we read the scriptures over here, so we see that because of the dispute, basically it was because among the herdsmen. Okay, so the herdsmen of Abraham and the herdsmen of Lot, they both used to go out and make the cattle graze. And because the influx had increased in number greatly, we see that the pastures had become very insufficient for them to graze. And because of that, we see there was a lot of conflict between disputes between the herdsmen of Lot and the herdsmen of Abraham. So this situation came before Abraham, and Lot was a person who brought the situation before Abraham. But we see, though Lot was so much concerned about this that is happening, and probably he was quite selfish about it, but we see Abraham reacting in a very mature and godly manner. We see Abraham suggesting separation for a good cause for both. Okay, so he suggested that they both should separate, they and their full team or the group or the whole household, they should separate and go to different directions, so that there will be less disputes, and it will also reduce the sourness in the relationships, and it will also be good actually for both of them, in their relation wise, in their family terms, because staying together and having a lot of conflicts is better to go separate directions and maintain that good relationship. So probably Abraham suggested that, and he suggested a separation for a good cause of both. Okay, so he also allowed or offered Lot the privilege of choosing first, making the first choice, and Abraham would definitely take the remaining part. So whatever Lot would choose, Abraham would be fine with the remaining part or the rest of the part. So the first choice was given to Lot. So here we see the change in the attitude of people when they prosper, when they gain a lot of wealth, when they gain a lot of property. So we see the change in the attitude of the people that comes their way. So increased property had actually negatively affected Lot, but in this, and he became very insecure, and he became very lustful for the materialistic things. But on the other hand, we see Abraham did not on Abraham it did not have any effect. So he was fine, he was the same, almost the same with as he was before and as he is now. So Abraham's decision suggests his maturity and his desire to witness a godly character among the ungodly people. So if we see verse 7b to verse 8, we see that they were living among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and Abraham did not want to spoil their testimony by making the dispute open or known to the outsiders. He knew that if they remained together and the dispute increased because it was happening probably on the daily basis. So if the dispute increased, it would be visible to the people outside. So he did not want to spoil the testimony and did not want to spoil the name of the house. Okay, so he patiently and he very secretly, we would say, and very maturely and very very godly, wise manner, he made Abraham separate and go to another place. So we see he wisely allowed Lot to make the first choice, trusting for his household to God. So he knew that God is with him, and wherever he Abraham would be, God and his blessing and his presence will be with him, and God's provision will always be with him. So he had that kind of faith on God. So the next thing that we see is the decision that is based on faith, which is seen in chapter 13, verse 10 to 18. So we see about Lot's choice. Okay, so Lot's choice revealed about his character. We see that with the choice that Lot made, we see that he was full of lust for materialistic advantages, and this blinded him. So he had become very materialistically lustful, and he was always seeking for materialistic gains. And we see that he became very happy when Abraham told him to choose or take the for a first choice. So we see that he neither recognized his duty towards Abraham, nor could he see the danger of living in close proximity with the people of Sodom. So he chose the area that was very clear, very green, okay, very green, that valley which was very green, and he chooses the best part of the land when he sees, and he chooses that part. He did not realize that by doing this, he actually he was devoiding of Abraham of a lot of pastures that could have been, shared among them. But he selfishly basically chose the land that was best. And second thing, we saw that he did not even think of the danger because he was going to live near Sodom. Okay, so he did not even realize the risk or the danger of basically spiritual contamination or the bad kind of living while living near the people of Sodom. For him, basically the grass for his sheep was the most important. Okay, so for him, basically we see that the land, whatever pleased his eyes, he was a person who he took that. Okay, so if that land, the green part of the land, it pleased his eyes, he took that land, and he was not bothered about God and communion with God or the clear conscience with God before God. So his main thing was whatever pleases the eyes, he is going to opt for that. So he first chooses the green valley, then gradually we see that he moves towards Sodom and finally settles in it. Okay, so it's step by step that he goes. He was pleased with that green valley. So he goes and starts living in that which was near Sodom, and then gradually we see that he moves and settles in it, in Sodom itself. Okay, among the people, among the ungodly people. So Lot is a type of one who begins well, but walking in faith, he soon becomes tired. Okay, so walking in faith tires him gradually. So that's what we see about Lot and his choice. The separation from his family was now complete, as we see about Abraham. So gradually we know that in Haran his father had died, and now we see that Lot had also separated. So the separation from his kindred and household was now completely completed. Okay, so pleased with Abraham's response towards test, God encouraged and rewarded him. So we see that whatever was happening right now, God was happy the way Abraham handled the situation, and God encouraged him and rewarded him. Though probably Abraham was quite sad about Lot leaving from that place. So he spoke to him he spoke to him and enlarged on his original promise. So whatever God promised him earlier, God actually expanded on it and enlarged that promise about his descendants. And God assured him of his divine protection. So God even told him that wherever he goes, in the length and the breadth of Canaan, God's protection will be with him. God's divine presence will be with him. Okay, next we see about Abraham himself, about how his life has changed and about how he has changed as a person. We see that he is ready to risk all he has to save others. Okay, initially we saw in the last chapter we saw that how to save his life he even put his wife into trouble. But now we see that he is ready to risk his life and everything that he has to save other people. to save others. So this chapter records the first war in the Bible. Okay, it records the first war in the Bible. The last is mentioned in Revelation chapter 19, verses 11 to 21. But the first war or the first battle is mentioned here in this chapter, chapter 14. Okay, and we see here that the 9 nations were involved in this war, and 5 kings revolted against the king of Elam and his 3 allies. Okay, so we saw it's a quite in that area, we can say, in that locality or nation, it was quite a big battle where 9 nations were involved, 5 kings were involved, and to revolt against Elam and his 3 allies. So let's see the archaeology of Genesis, archaeology and Genesis 14. Okay, so archaeologists show the names of kings of Genesis 14 are forms of the early second millennium BC. So we can see that these names that are mentioned in this passage, these kind of names did exist in the second millennium BC. So when archaeologists were digging and they came across these tablets and everything, we come to know that in the second millennium BC, these kind of names were there. Okay, so we see that there is an equivalent of Arioch, which is mentioned in chapter 14, verse 1. It was found in the Mari and the Nuzi tablets. Then we have this name of the king Kedorlaomer, okay, Kedorlaomer of Elam. He's a typical Elamite name. Okay, and it's a pat. I mean, the kind of pattern of names that are found. So it matched the name Kedorlaomer. It matched with that kind of names. Okay, then we have Tidal. The name Tidal is also mentioned over there. It also corresponds to Tudalia. Okay, a royal name of the Hittites. So we see that these kind of names and this kind of names were available and were there found in the similar patterns in the tablets that have been found or excavated. Okay, then we see that critics once believed that Genesis 14 was only a legend. They believe because there is a sudden, it's a sudden scene of war, and after that there is no war. We see a sudden scene of war, and then a battle basically, and then we also see one character coming in, and suddenly he disappears. Okay, so the critics once believed that Genesis 14 was just a legend because of the unusual route of march from through Gilead and Moab, as it is mentioned in this passage. Okay, but in 1929, we see Albright discovered a string of buried cities. Okay, he discovered a string of buried cities, means a number of buried cities in line along this route. Okay, so which made it clear and it confirmed that there was a caravan route. Okay, there was a caravan route until 1200 BC in this very area, which people thought it to be a legend. Okay, so this was known as the King's Highway. So this route was excavated, and the people and this archaeologists came to know, yes, this was a route which was there, and people did used to travel through this route. So the Eastern kings desired to get the copper and magnesium and other kind of mineral deposits from Edom and Midian. They also sought for asphalt of the Dead Sea area, from the Dead Sea area, and which was also demanded a lot in Babylonia. So we see people from different areas. They used to travel to these places and get these kind of things, these kind of minerals and everything, and take it back to Babylon and other places. Okay. Next thing, in this only we see that Abraham was a person who became a very daring person. So he daringly rescued some people and Lot. Okay. So we see here in chapter 14, verses 1 to 16. So here we see that Palestine from the ancient times had suffered a lot of invasions. Okay, Palestine was a place who initially from not only from the time of Joshua, we see initially also in a patriarchal period also it suffered a lot of invasions, a lot of attacks, and it was in complete submission to the conquering empires. Whoever conquered it, it was under complete submission to it. So in Abraham's times, at times we see that it was Elam, okay, Elam, which is the modern Iran. Okay, for 12 years they paid tribute to the king Kedorlaomer. Okay, so they were under Kedorlaomer at that time, and they used to pay tribute to him. Okay, so in those days, the southern Palestine revolted and refused to pay tribute to Kedorlaomer. So he, along with his allies, basically along with his allies, he marched and attacked Palestine. So they had many battles and subdued the land completely from south of Edom to the Sinai Peninsula. So we see that Kedorlaomer was a very powerful king at that time, and we see that with many battles after many wars, we see that he completely subdued the land from the south of Edom to Sinai Peninsula. So at the valley of Siddim, the armies of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar fought the invaders, but they were defeated in the battle, and they all fled from there. Okay, fled for their lives to save themselves because they had been defeated. So Abraham heard about these results of the battle from the refugees. Okay, and the fugitives hoped that Abraham would help. Okay, so because Abraham was a very popular person, Abraham had become a very wealthy man and he had become a very powerful person by this time. So he hoped the people who were defeated at that time, they hoped that Abraham would be able to rescue his nephew Lot, and along with it, he will also be able to rescue the captives from Sodom. But Lot, basically we know that Lot trouble ended up in trouble for himself. So separation, basically we see about Abraham over here that separation is not to be used as an excuse to withhold brotherly kindness. So we know that Abraham went ahead and fought the battle for his nephew at that time, and he saved him and he brought him back along with some other people. Okay, so we see that though they were separated, Abraham did not take it as an excuse that okay, he has gone now, I'm not going to fight for him and I'm not going to show kindness to him. But we see that Abraham put everything into risk and took up the danger and risked his life and when to fight for Lord. The person separated from sin should be the one to lend helping hand to those in need. So that is what we see in Abraham. Abraham's swift action reverses the result of the battle as the peace loving patriarch takes up the sword. So we see that Abraham took up the sword. He decided to fight. He decided to go in for war, for the battle, and his actions basically reversed the result of the war. So now it was in Abraham's side. The battle turned into Abraham's side. So Abraham calls on his three allies. His three allies joined him, and then he takes his 318 trained men, and by faith, and he sets out on a rescue mission to rescue the captives and to rescue Lot, his nephew. So a long march. After a long march, we see he attacks the enemies in the night. Okay, so in the dead of the night when everybody is sleeping, he wages a surprise attack on them from all the four sides, and the army was unexpected of this attack. They all were resting and they all were sleeping, so they were attacked, and Abraham, along with his three allies, was able to release the captives and liberate them. So it was something very different in those times that we see from Abraham. We have not seen him fighting after that or before that, but now we see that he, along with his allies and wisdom that he had, the strategy that he designed, he waged a surprising attack on from all the four sides, and he defeated the army and liberated the captives from there. Okay, so the people expected from him that he would set them free, and he was able to do that along with his three allies. So many people were captives. Many people basically are captives of Satan, and they are just like they were under Kedar Lamer, and they are paying tributes and serving him. Jesus came to set his captives free. So here we can see that Abraham was just like the Savior Jesus Christ, and he was able to rescue the people from the bondage, from this kind of slavery. Okay, so we see that here we, as we are trained under God, as we are trained in His army, we are called for His rescue mission, and we are with Him to fight the battle. The next thing that we see now is the blessings after the victory. So blessings after the victory. So this we are going to see after from the time. Yeah, so we see the blessings after the victory, which is mentioned in chapter 14, verse 16 to 24, and we also see it in Hebrews chapter 5, verse 10, 11, and 7, verses 1 to 17. So here basically we'll talk about after the war how basically how Abraham was able to gain victory over their his enemies and how God blessed him. The first thing that we see here is Melchizedek blessing Abraham. So this passage, basically chapter 14, verses 6 to 20, these verses, this passage introduces a strange character, an unknown character named Melchizedek. Who is this Melchizedek? Okay, Melchizedek, how did how did he know about the God Most High? because till now we have only been reading about Abraham knowing the Most High God, not in that name, but he knowing the true God and following him. So suddenly we see some other individual coming up and knowing about the one true God. Okay, so it's something strange and something different, and it's an addition that we see over here of a person who also knows God. So it simply means that when God is talking to Abraham, and basically leading him and working in his life, he has not rejected the other people. He has not rejected the other part of the world, but he is also meeting and talking to those people who want to know him and who want to serve him. So God, though yes, he was working through Abraham, but definitely he could also be seen through Melchizedek in those times. So Melchizedek was one of the most mysterious person in the Bible. He appears for a moment, and he's never seen again. Okay, so he just goes and then he suddenly disappears, suddenly comes and suddenly disappears. So that's a very strange thing about Melchizedek, and that is why a lot of theories have come up according about him. So, but in New Testament, we see that he represents a type of Christ. Okay, he's called a type of Christ. So something that he was a manifestation or pre-incarnate Christ, manifestation of Christ before his incarnation. But it could not be possible, because about him it is said that he served as a king and a priest of a Canaanite town. Okay, so it's very clear, it is written, though it's his coming and going, where he went, came from, where he is going to, where his genealogy, nothing is mentioned. But it is definitely written about him that he served as a king and priest in a Canaanite town. So that's very much known. So he cannot be a pre-incarnate Christ, or he cannot be a manifestation of Christ before his incarnation, because his place of ruling and his place of ministering is mentioned here. Okay, so in Hebrews chapter 7, verse 3, it is mentioned that he was like the Son of God. Okay, but it is not mentioned that he was the Son of God. So he is not a pre incarnate Christ, because it is mentioned that he was like. Okay, but there is a difference between being like and and being. There's a difference between like and being. So he was not the Son of God, but he was like the Son of God. So it's a type that we're talking about. So it is assumed that he knew about God through his ancestors being through Noah and his sons. So he came to know from them, from his ancestors, about the God Most High. And many people knew God in that sense through Noah and his ancestors and their ancestors, because Shem, Ham, and Japheth, they only were the three sons who had gone to different places, and from them a lot of things about God would have been known. So I believe that even more than Melchizedek, there were many other people who actually knew about God at that time, because of Noah and his sons, their ancestors. Okay, so they would be knowing, but we see the mention of Melchizedek over here. Okay, he did know God personally. That's the difference. That people knew about God, but Melchizedek is here a person who is like Abraham, who knows God personally. Okay, he knows God personally. God has always revealed himself to all who want to know him and serve him. So again, we see that this is the first time Bible mentions the term priest. Okay, so this is the first time where God Bible mentions the term priest. So we'll see a lot of first times when it has come to Melchizedek. Okay, first time Bible mentions the word priest. Till now we have known that the head of the family acted as the priest. Okay, so there is no mention of priest till now, but we see here is the first time priest is mentioned, and Melchizedek is that person. Then we see this is the first time when bread and wine is mentioned in the Bible. We all know its significance in the New Testament, but in the Old Testament, it talks about fellowship. Okay, fellowship, when people used to come together and fellowship. And this is, you have to understand, this is far before Moses had come, and far before Moses had given those things where you have to use wine and where you have to use all those laws and everything. So it's far before that. Okay, so we see that even Melchizedek, it was a cultural thing in that time. It was a cultural thing, and people used to fellowship with bread and wine. So it is mentioned here, bread and wine, because it is Canaan, and we know it is widely available, wine especially. Okay, and the bread is used for fellowship. So we see here Melchizedek bringing out wine and bread, and they are fellowshipping. He's fellowshipping with Abraham. He blessed Abraham, and this gives glory to God for the victory that Abraham has won right now. As a priest, Melchizedek comes out and he worships the Lord and has fellowship with the victor. Okay, so it acknowledges Abraham as an instrument of God. Okay, so we can see that God used Abraham as his instrument, and Abraham responds by giving a tenth of everything that he had gained to Melchizedek. So this give and take shows a very important scene over here, where Melchizedek is, bringing out bread and wine and having fellowship and blessing Abraham. And in the same way, we see Abraham bringing out all one tenth of portions of everything and giving it to Melchizedek as a priest. So this one tenth is basically the God's portion. Okay, so he's giving it to Melchizedek. Bible says Melchizedek is a beautiful type of the Son of God. Okay, so his dignity in receiving the tithe is God's portion. So in his dignity in receiving the tithe, the union of the priesthood and the kingship in one person, and his title as the King of Righteousness and the King of Peace, all these pictures as the one who was to come, that is Jesus Christ. So we know that Jesus is called the King of Righteousness. We know that he is called the King of Peace. Okay, we know that he is the priest. He's a priesthood of all believers, and then we know that he is the King. Okay, so all these things combined together, and this all these things also address to Melchizedek as well as to Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ has a type in the Old Testament, that is in Melchizedek. So though genealogies were very important in those times and even today, but we see that no record is mentioned of Melchizedek's ancestors. So nobody knows who was his father, nobody knows who were his ancestors and what happened after that, but we know only Melchizedek. So where he came from, what he did, we have no idea. But we know that his genealogy is not present. He just comes and he disappears. That's what we see over here, because his mention is not there after this. He was a priest of God, and he was divinely appointed by God, not his ancestry. So he did not become a priest because of his ancestry, but because of the appointment of God, which is how it was in Jesus Christ's case also, because Jesus belongs to the tribe of Judah, and the priests used to come from the tribe of Levi. We all know that as we were studying in Hebrew subject, so we have studied all these things. We also see that he foreshadowed the eternal priesthood of Christ. Okay, because he is not from the Levi, and Levi is not still there, not yet there. Okay, so he was by divine appointment. So we also see that he pictures Jesus. He pictures Jesus without beginning of the day or the end of life. So we do not know what happened in his future. We do not know where he came from. So he remains a priest forever. Okay, so we only know that he was a priest and a king. Okay, in the same way as we know about Jesus Christ. So here are some similarities between Jesus as a type of Melchizedek as a type of Christ. So we see about Melchizedek that Melchizedek blessed Abraham. Christ blesses us. Melchizedek is the king of peace, Salem, and Christ is the prince of peace. He gives peace. Okay, then we see Melchizedek is the king of righteousness. Jesus Christ is the king and the Lord of our righteousness. Melchizedek is a priest of the Most High God. Christ is the high priest. He's the mediator. Melchizedek has no genealogy, Christ no beginning or end. Then we see that Melchizedek is a priesthood not by earthly lineage, but by the priesthood, and Christ is the priesthood by power of endless life. Okay, so we see about Melchizedek, he is superior to the Levitical system or Levitical priests. Christ is also superior to all earthly priests. Then we see that Melchizedek is honored by Abraham, and Christ is honored and revered by all creation. Okay, this is what we see as Melchizedek type of Christ. This is quite important for your course. Okay, then we come to the last part of this point, which is honoring God with tithe. Okay, honoring God with tithe in Genesis 14, verse 11 to 12, 16, and 22 for 24. We see these things over here. Why did Abraham give tithe to Melchizedek? Okay, this is the question, because at that time we know the tithing system was not there. In our knowledge, it was not there, but probably we can understand from this portion that it was being followed in their custom and in their culture. It was being followed, but it was never mentioned in the Bible before. Okay, so why did Abraham give tithe to Melchizedek? Okay, giving tithe into God was an act of worship. Okay, so Abraham, when he gave tithe to the priest of God, he was worshiping God in that sense. So, doing this, by doing this here, or tithing, Abraham expressed the following things. Okay, so let us see what it meant when Abraham was tithing, or when Abraham gave his tithe to Melchizedek. Okay, so let's see. In regard with the Creator, in regard with God, we see that Abraham was grateful to God. Grateful for what? He was grateful for God's protection over his life. He was grateful for the victory that God gave him, and he was grateful that God brought him back safely and God blessed him. Okay, so we see that tithing, when Abraham tithed, or when the tithing of Abraham showed his gratitude towards the Creator. Then we see it shows a submission to God. It shows submission to the Creator. So we also see that Abraham, by giving tithe to God, by giving tithe to Melchizedek, we see that he was submitting himself to God, okay, to his Creator. So because he was so grateful to God, he also devoted himself and dedicated himself and submitted himself completely to the Creator and to his guidance. Then we see the recognition of ownership. So we see that he recognized that God is the owner of everything, of the land, of the earth, and everything, and from him everything comes, and he is the owner of everything. Next we see to the ministers. Minister is who over here? It is Melchizedek. So he recognized the ministry and the minister, and recognized minister Melchizedek as the minister of God, or the servant of God. We also see that he also recognized the responsibility or the service that Melchizedek had towards his people and towards God. So we see that he not only recognized Melchizedek in his position, but also recognized Melchizedek's service. Okay, then we also see his response to the blessing. So when Melchizedek blessed him, he in return gave tithe. Okay, so this was his response to the minister by blessing and giving him. Okay, so we see how what is the expression of tithe in that time when Abraham gave tithe to Melchizedek. So this again we see this is the first time the practice of tithing is mentioned in the Bible. Okay, before that the mention of the tithing is not mentioned ever in the Bible. We see it only after Moses. Okay, but before that it is not mentioned. But we see here, even before the time of Moses, tithing was introduced. Tithing was common, and people used to tithe to God and their priests of the gods and goddesses. So we see here this was the first time this practice of tithing is mentioned in the Bible. So tithing was also a way in which all liberated prisoners could join in recognizing God's deliverance and mercy to them. So we see that when the prisoners, or we can say sinful people, they wanted to recognize God and his deliverance and his mercy, they used to give to God the 1/10 portion of everything that they had. So this is what one of the concepts that we have in the Old Testament. Before, even before Moses' time, all this was prevalent as a culture. The bread and wine we saw, and the tithing and the priesthood, it was all prevalent at that time, and God picked up from those things, and he instituted it in the laws that he gave. It was very public, and we can see that this tithing was done publicly, and people came to know and people saw it happening. So it was a kind of testimony before all the people that God has blessed them. Okay, let's move ahead and let's see the attitudes towards the possession. So what kind of attitude did Abraham have toward the possessions that he was given? So after being blessed by Melchizedek, he met the king of Sodom. Okay, so the king of Sodom came to him, and he met him, and he made an offer, a very generous offer to him. And he said, you give me the people, all the people that have been released from the as captives. Okay, give me all the people, and you take for yourself, or keep for yourself, all the spoils or all the goods that you have attained in the battle. Okay, so this was the offer. It was a very good offer that Abraham received from the king of Sodom. Okay, so we see Abraham could have seen this as a great opportunity. If Abraham was money minded, or Abraham was lusting for property, if Abraham was lusting for materialistic blessings, this was a very, 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 very good offer, because the king of Sodom said, "You give me all the men, and you keep all the goods that you have gained from this battle." Okay, but we see Abraham, what does he do? He preferred to be known as prospering only because of God's blessing. So he rejected. He did not want to keep the men, nor did he want to keep the spoils that he gained from this battle. So he according to him, if he was blessed, if he prospered, he wanted it to be from God and not from any human resource or human or kings. Okay, so he did not want to tell that, he did not want his witness to be that I prospered because of this king. So he did not want people to say that he is prospering because this king is with him, because this king has given this to him. Okay, so he basically, we see that he wanted the credit to go to God only for blessing him. Okay, not to any other human source. Then we see that Abraham accepted only what his men ate on the trip. Okay, that was very menial. Whatever the men ate on the trip, he accepted that as and his share as an ally, whatever it was his share as an ally, he accepted that. But on top of that, he did not take anything else. And from that itself, he gave a 1/10 to be to God. Okay, to Melchizedek, he gave 1/10 to that. Okay, so we see that he was very grateful to God for the victory, and everything that he had received, it was from God. And from that also, whatever he gained, he did not keep much for himself. He gave 1/10, or the tithe to God in every way. Okay, the last part, the last main point that we see over here, it is very important point, we can say. It is a covenant and prophecy. Okay, so Abraham has gone through a lot of tough times, a lot of highs and lows. He has left his family and his kindred, and he has been depending on God for everything, for his kindness, for his protection, and for his support. So for everything, he has been depending on God. He had nothing to do with his kindred and family and his, people of his household. Nothing. He was depending only on God. He was able to overcome temptations of fear, selfishness, and riches. And he went through a prolonged phase of test of faith. He and Sarah were still childless. Okay, how could he be the father of great nation when he had no son of his own? That was a big question that was lingering in his heart, lingering in his mind, that he has been walking for so long in faith, and this has changed his life. He has moved on in his life, but still, how can the promise of God be fulfilled when he has no son of his own? Okay, so that was a genuine question that was in his heart. Okay, so let's see how God dealt with it. So first thing that we're going to see, the promise, faith, and righteousness. For the first time again in the scriptures, we will read the word of the Lord came in a vision. Okay, so till now, God, that's not mentioned, the word of the Lord. Word of the Lord has never come to people till now, but we see that here, for this, for the first time, it is mentioned in this way, that the word of the Lord came in a vision. So probably it is Christ, or probably how God is showing, probably it is Christ, because that's how we can understand the word. Okay, so the Lord speaks to people according to their needs. Okay, so at this time, we know with Abraham was in a very different kind of phase. He was in a very different mood setup. He was in a very different emotional setup right now, and God understands. Okay, God understands in whatever phase of mind, emotions we are. So Lord speaks to the people based on their needs, what kind of needs they are having. God speaks to them in that way. So Abraham probably was afraid at that time, because he had just routed the kings, for those kings at night, and a surprise. And now again it is night, and Abraham is actually very worried at this time, and probably very scared that probably what he has done with those kings by routing them in the night in surprise, those kings would do it back to him. They will attack him in the darkness of the night. Okay, so thick of the night. So he's scared about that. So he's afraid. Firstly, he's quite afraid. And the Lord speaks to him as an answer. He says, "Do not be afraid, Abraham. I am your shield." So God confirms to him that God is with him. He assures him that he is his protection and his shield. He doesn't have to be afraid. Then he may even be thinking that probably he did a foolishness by rejecting the award or the reward that was coming to him by the king of Sodom. And then God tells him that I am your very great reward. That's what God says. Do not think about all those rewards or materialistic things that the king of Sodom was going to give you, but I am your very great reward, and you can have nothing more than me. Okay, so I am everything. Okay, I am your very great reward. If I am with you, you do not need anything. And then we also see as God comforted him, okay, with all these words, as God was with him and he was reassuring him, Abraham gathered little strength. Okay, Abraham gathered little strength to share his problem with God, and he openly shared with God that he and Sarah are still childless. Okay, all he gained after so many so much trading, and after so many blessings that God has given him, he has acquired so much wealth, so much money, so much property, so much men. His mind was going, after I go, what will happen to all of this? And did I acquire all these things for my enemies to take it away, or for somebody just to take it away from me? I still have no son. And why such a long wait? Why I have to wait so long for just a son, for a descendant, for an heir? Where where am I going to leave all these things and go in whose hands? And according to the provision in the law, in we can in those places in the Canaan or Palestine, at this time, we see the Nuzi tablets inform us that a childless couple could adopt a servant as a son. Okay, so we can see that a childless couple, if a couple does not have a child, they could adopt a servant as their son. So that was allowed according to the law provision in Canaan at that time. Okay, so he would have been given that servant who was adopted as a son. He would be given full complete legal rights as an heir if he took complete care of the master and properly buried him when he dies. Okay, so if he took care of his master very nicely and he buried him very nicely, when he dies, then he will become the heir and have the full rights to his property. So Abraham asks God out of concern. It's not out of lack of faith, but it is out of concern. God, what do you want actually? What do you mean? What do you want? Uh, should I make Eliezer the heir? Because he doesn't know what God has planned. So he asks, should I make Eliezer the heir? God understands Abraham's struggle because he's becoming old and he understands his struggle. And God, in his loving patience, takes him by his hand and, takes him out and shows him the starry hosts of heaven. He shows them the sky and he repeats his promise about his descendants to Abraham, that he was going to make his descendants like the dust of the earth and as innumerable as the stars of the eastern sky. So God reminds him, and when he sees all these things in front of his eyes, his heart becomes quiet and peaceful. And then he starts believing, yes, whatever God is saying, let it happen. So Abraham believed it. Abraham believed it, though he did not have even one son. He believed for descendants that would be like the dust of the earth and innumerable as the stars in the sky. So he believed that, and it was credited to him as righteousness. That is what Genesis 15:6 tells us. This was the first time the basic doctrine of justification by faith has been openly said. Okay, so it is said that it is written that he believed the Lord and he credited it to him as righteousness. So this is the first time where this mention of justification by faith has come into being, where he believes and he has faith and he is called righteous because of that, because he believed he is called righteous. Okay, so Paul takes this, and towards in the New Testament we see that Paul points towards this, and it is used as a historical basis for this teaching of justification by faith. Okay, so we can see that from Abraham's this thing, this attitude and God's this statement and this judgment upon Abraham, that because he believed, it has been credited to him as his righteousness. We have this doctrine of justification by faith. Okay, then we see that he looked at Abraham's faith and accepted it, and as complete conformity to God's will. Okay, and thus counting Abraham as righteous and upright in his sight. So, what is righteousness? Righteousness is rightness, freedom from guilt or sin, goodness as measured by God's standards. And we see justification. Justification is the act of making just, taking away guilt, and giving a right standing before God. Similarly, all who put their trust in the Lord are accepted by God as righteous. So God's righteousness becomes our righteousness, our sins are forgiven, and the Holy Spirit comes and lives in us and unites us with Christ. Abraham was called righteous even before Mosaic law or circumcision. It was based on his faith. So he did not have to do anything. He just had to believe God. That's what we see here. So even before he was circumcised, even before Mosaic law had come, we see that Abraham just believed in whatever God said, and it was credited to him as righteousness. He was made righteous even without circumcision. It was just by believing in God that he became righteous, that God called him righteous. His faith was more than intellectual agreement with the truth. So he did not have to have, because he was seeing something else and God is saying something else. So he did not have to have that intellectual agreement, okay, with the truth right at that time, but he just had to believe. He just had to believe what God is saying. He believed means to be steady, to steady oneself on by leaning on something, to make steady oneself by leaning on something. That means by depending on something or relying on something. So we see that he leaned on God. He leaned on God and he trusted God. He leaned on God and he trusted God fully. Okay, he relied on God for everything. That's what. That's why it is said that he believed and he was called righteous. Abraham's faith was not based on occasional beliefs. Okay, occasional faith. It's not that God did this, so I will believe. God did this, so I will believe. No, it was not occasional. It was continuous. Every time it was continuous trust. So he trusted the fuller revelation of God, not just in when it was like one just small here, small revelation there. No, not like that. He believed God's fuller revelation, complete revelation, that it is God and I can depend on him. Okay, in verse 7, the subject shifts from the promise of the son to the promise of the land. Okay, so how can so basically Abraham uh, then asks this question: how can I know that I will gain this possession or possession of it? How can I know that I can gain possession of it? Verse 8, Abraham need strength. Okay, Abraham needs strength. He believes, he definitely believes, but he needs strength to overcome this unbelief. Okay, this unbelief of this situation, because God has promised and he has believed it. But that emotionally, that because you have not seen it happening, because it's not happening in front of your eyes, it needs some kind of strength to overcome that test and believe and completely rely on God. That's what we are seeing over here, that he's saying, how can I take possession of this? How can I take possession of this? And God will strengthen him gradually. So we see that next we'll move into this only, where we will see how God responds to him. So we see that God responds to Abraham in verse 8, and he instructs him to get animals ready for a formal covenant. So this is a very important part of Abraham's life, where God is going to, for the first time, actually cut a covenant. Okay, make a covenant, a formal covenant with Abraham. So the conversation of verses 1 to 8 seems to have taken place in the night, and the action of this is going to take place in the next day. So God confirmed his word with supernatural sign. Okay, so it is always important. God knows that human beings need signs. Okay, Abraham needed sign. God has promised him such a big thing. Okay, Abraham needed faith for that, to believe it, and Abraham needed a confirmation, a sign, okay, for that. So God decided to cut a covenant so that Abraham can believe it. Okay, Abraham can see something happening in front of him and he would believe it. So God cut a covenant, okay, with Abraham according to this custom in those days. Okay, so this was a common practice in those days, where the two parties would cut a covenant, place animals on this side and this side after cutting, and they both will take a sword and move from between, saying their promises, stating their promises, and taking the sword. It means that if I do not fulfill my promise, you can cut me or kill me with this sword. So this is a cut covenant, cutting a covenant. Okay, so since God was the only one making the promise this time, he asked Abraham to cut the animals and put on the other side, and then God himself, making promise, walked through it, walked through the middle of it, in the form of blazing torch and a smoking oven. Okay, that is was the form in which God moved in between both, and he was the one who promised, so he is the one who is going. Okay, so God initiated the promise of giving land to Abraham, and he will work it out. Okay, it was God who initiated, and he is going to keep the conditions, and he is going to make the conditions favorable so that Abraham will get this land, his descendants will get this land. Just like the new covenant he has made with us, his people will suffer. Okay, God also informed him that his people are going to suffer before they take possession of this promised land. It is in the same way we can see that Satan also many times, tries to steal the promises from us. He tries to steal away the sacrifice of Christ from the seekers of God. He tries to deviate their mind, distract their mind, and take away the sacrifice from them. So in the same way, we see Abraham was fighting to keep the birds away from the prey and stealing the sacrifice. And his deep sleep also, and the horror of the great darkness was overshadowing it. Okay, so we see that this is how Satan works many times. That yes, the promise is before us, the covenant is before us, the cut covenant is before us, but still. He tries to steal away that sacrifice. He tries to steal away that hope. He tries to steal away that salvation from us. Okay, the form in which God chose to manifest his presence was also symbolic. Like he moved in a smoking and blazing torch. So we see that the smoke and blazing torch is also form of furnace of affliction. Okay, where people will go through and be tested, and when they come across it with success, they will win. But God would be with them to bring them out victoriously. Okay, so the same symbols are used by God when he was bringing Israel out of Egypt. So he brought the people out in the form of a cloud during the day and a torch of fire, a pillar of fire during the night. Okay, that's how God brought them. So at Sinai, we see fire and smoke. So fire means cleansing, consuming, and unapproachable presence of God, holiness of God. And the smoke is the heart of the fire, which is covered by darkness. So God can never be fully revealed nor fully hidden, completely hidden, because God is completely glorious. So that's what we see, how fire and smoke is symbolizing. Before they could take the inheritance, they had to suffer enslavement and oppression for 400 years in Egypt. Okay, Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 to 16, God utters sevenfold prophecy to Abraham. First, his descendants would be strangers in the foreign land. Second, they would be servants. They would be there. Third, they would be there for 400 years. Fourth, God would judge the nation, that is Egypt. Then fifth, God would bring Abraham. God would spare Abraham. Then sixth, after the long 4 generations, Israel would return to Canaan. What are these 4 generations? Levi, Abraham's great grandson. Levi's son Kohath, Kohathite's son Amram, Amram's son Moses, and Moses will be the person who is going to bring them out of Egypt. Now is the seventh part of the sevenfold promises that God had. Israel would come out with great substance. Okay, they would come out more powerful and more strength, full of strength. Okay. So the delay in judgment, as we see, the delay in judgment of the Canaanites shows us the patient waiting of the God, so that the corruption would grow in its full course, and only then God will bring judgment upon them. So the invasion under Joshua would be an act of justice rather than just aggression. Okay, so God is always merciful, so he waited, and when God brings judgment, it simply means that there has to be justice, and it is not the anger of God, but it is the act of God which needs to be done because of justice. So the main promise of the covenant was that after 400 years, God would give Abraham's descendants the land between the river of Egypt and Euphrates. Okay, so the promise was fulfilled for Israel. It did take the line. The promise was fulfilled for Israel. Did take the line and occupy. Okay, so we can understand that the promise did take time to be fulfilled, because Abraham did not Israel did not have full faith upon Egypt, upon God at that time, so that they could obey God fully, and he could bring them out of the promised land. Sin and unbelief kept them from possessing all the land and that God had promised. So we know that when they, even along with Joshua, when they went to that land and tried to capture that land, take possession of that land, they did not completely fight and kick the enemies out, but they allowed them to stay around them. So they could not take the full possession of the land because of the lack of faith in God. Okay, so why now? Let us see why this land of Palestine or Canaan. So Palestine is a geographical bridge between the continents of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Okay, so it was in the center. It was right in the center, which bridges the continents of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Even Egypt is in that manner. So we can see that Egypt is a country. We can see so Europe, Asia, and Africa. It is right in the center of it. Okay, right in the center of that continent or continents. Okay, so this was a strategic location from where they would exercise a major influence on the world. So we all know that Palestine is right in the center or in the heart of the globe. Okay, so from where it can exercise its authority or influence on the world all over. Okay, so this is what we saw just now. We just now saw about Abraham and his tests and his struggles and his temptations, and how Abraham persevered and how Abraham was able to be victorious over all these tests and temptations. Okay, so we end the class over here, and we hope to meet soon. And please watch the video carefully, take notes, and uh, if you have any questions, please note it down, and we will discuss about it when we meet. Okay, thank you. God bless you.